Right, let's get started. 16 minutes late. So, if you are seated here, you will be on camera, on live stream. So just so you know. So welcome very much to the Decentralized Camp. Maybe it's the meetup number 25 or 30 or something, counting from the start. Very good. My name is Thomas. And yeah, that's how it is. Today we're going to have two really interesting talks. First of all, follow Decentralized Camp on Twitter, Decentralized CA. It's the maximum length of our Twitter handle. We're going to have two very good talks today. We're going to hear from Jonas, Carl, and Xavi about Ethereum 2.0 and staking. How you get rich by doing nothing, maybe.
Pretty much, yeah.
Or how you lose all your ether because you get penalized. We'll see. One of those two, I guess. Yeah, the speakers today, and after that we're going to hear from Joel from Treebox, who's going to be talking about portable user data on Ethereum. Correct? Very good. Very interesting. So, but first we have to execute on the gossip protocol. And that's when we talk about interesting stuff, which is not on the agenda. So a few things we could mention is that there will be more Decentralized Camp in 2020. Because we've been too much crypto winter, too much hangover from the hype and everything. But now we're going to go back on track and really push more interesting events and a lot of more cool stuff. And I think we're looking forward to that a lot. And also we have a quick information from Patrick, who is involved in the EU blockchain partnership project, I think it's called. Do you want to say a few words about that? That would be very interesting to hear.
Yeah, all right. I was dropping by from Gothenburg to tell you this, but the European Blockchain Partnership is a collective initiative from the member states in the European Union, and also our neighboring country Norway is part of it. And it's actually the term blockchain partnership is not telling anything. We are also building something called the European Blockchain Service Infrastructure. And my colleague here, Peter Altman, can answer some of the questions if you have anything regarding that. I'm part of one of the working groups called Diplomas. So we will, on top of a new type of self-sovereign identities, support students and citizens with their long life learning. So that's something I'm working on. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Looking forward to talking more to you guys later. So, any other things? There are some people here for the first time, I think, at the Decentralized Camp. 1, 2, 3. Very much welcome. And we'll see you again in January. Anybody who were at DevCon this year? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's pretty good. Joel, what did you think? It was good.
It was very different from previous years, but there was like
Give it the mic.
better signal to noise.
Okay. So it was better than last year, you think, in ways, or
Not in
was
terms of,
different?
like, how well organized it was, but it was like, I think it told a lot about. I think it said a lot about kind of the state of the technology. And how much is still left to do before all of this stuff is like ready to power the world economy.
Cool. So when do you think Ethereum 2 is fully released? No comment?
I mean, I don't think any software is ever fully released.
No software is ever fully released. Okay. That's true, I guess. When Ethereum 2 comes, the next one is Ethereum 3. But that's good. It's looking promising. So that's very, very nice. And we're going to hear from the guys about Ethereum 2. So looking forward to that a lot. All right. So anything cool you want to share or mention in the crypto space?
Not in the crypto space, but did you guys see the news in Greece about a law being passed that forces citizens to spend at least 30% of their income in digital ways? Otherwise, they would get tax penalties. That's the weirdest thing I've heard in a long time.
What do you mean digital what?
In digital spending of their income somehow. I don't know the details, but it's like to force the economy to become traceable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
So a hardcore law.
So instead of going and buying with cash groceries, you should actually buy them online.
Yeah, or card. Yeah, exactly. Whatever.
Can you use Zcash?
Zcash?
Probably not. I don't know if that classifies. It's
It's
digital,
very
but
digital.
is it traceable? Yeah, good question. I think the government might not be really clear on that.
Did they say why they want to do this?
To combat the black corruption economy.
Of course.
Yeah.
Is that stated, or is it just like to drive more adoption of the digital technology?
No, they stated that they want to reduce the size of the informal economy. As far as I could tell. It's a pretty weird move.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Personally, I'm paying more and more with cash nowadays to force people to take my cash.
Yeah.
Thank you. Applause from Håkan there.
Maybe crypto.
I think it was like 10 years ago, they had a law that you had to keep the receipt like an hour after you left the store or the restaurant, whatever. Okay, sorry. I don't know, maybe 10 years ago they had a law that forced you to keep a receipt for like an hour or so after you purchased something, just in order to be able to check on you afterwards that the restaurant actually gave you a receipt, and then they could sort of trace it back. For 1 hour? Yeah, I don't remember, but it was like you had to keep it for a certain time, 24 hours, whatever. I mean, in order to fight the black economy. So that's just another.
Yeah. Weird things. Anyway, so we're gonna get started with the first talk, and Jonas and Colin Xavi.
Yep.
Xavi in a little while, I think.
Showing
for the-
in a while. He will be showing.
Show my laptop.
Yeah. He'll
Yeah.
he'll
We're
be
gonna look
showing,
at your beautiful laptop.
He's gonna show what Ethereum 2.0 node looks like. So.
Is it red? Is it
Well, looks
green?
like a Mac. huh?
Things in the terminal happen.
So when you have questions, and you're gonna have a lot of questions, and you're gonna have a lot of facts and information too to share, because everybody here is just new on Ethereum too.
Maybe on the gossip, something that is interesting that we never touch upon is like the explosion of DeFi, or like how in the
Oh,
last
maybe
year
give him a mic. Yes.
Okay, you wanna stay on the gossip for a little while.
Yeah,
Okay. Let me just finish my sentence there. That I will give you the mic as soon as you need it. So provide any facts and thoughts and opinions on the topics. It's very, very good. And that's how we do it here. Okay, so Javier, you were mentioning DeFi as something we should gossip about.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been very interesting, because now it's been like acute, the term of DeFi and what the hell actually DeFi means. But it's been really interesting because it has been like exploding this last year with all these different products actually coming on the DeFi space, from Maker with their SI and their DAI, with a single collateral, multi-collateral, with Compound, with Uniswap, with DXDY. What do you guys feel about that space? Because it was really interesting, because there was an audit, well, not an audit, but like an assessment that Spank Chain, so they had a lot of cash from the like deposits. They didn't know what to do with it, so they thought like, oh, I'm gonna take a look at Compound to be able to see if it will be interesting to put all our Ether into Compound, so we can get a return, like a monthly return on that Ether. So he said, like, before I'm gonna put $500,000 in Compound, I'm gonna actually look at the contracts. What the fuck are they doing? And he soon realized that the contracts, yeah, they're decentralized in terms of what the logic does, but the power of the contract, they still own by Compound. So Compound in any moment could actually change things in the contract without no one's permission. And he had a specific term that I can't remember, but he was not talking about decentralized finance, but also trustless finance. because in this case, you still, the code is decentralized, but you still need to trust, you know, a compound. And he was like saying, if, you know, is it really true decentralized unless you actually need to, you know, trust also the people who is actually holding those contracts as well. So that was pretty interesting.
I guess we've learned a lot of things since kind of the DAO hack happened, and there's like a need for responsibility and actually being able to upgrade and fix things that go wrong. And like, even if the ideal would be that no one controls it, I think that's in many cases is super irresponsible. So there is a balance to be found there. I know Gnosis, for example, are experimenting with something called DXDAO, which is basically a DAO that is designed to control decentralized exchanges. And they basically initiated the DAO to get a lot of different actors to have reputation by having people stake tokens, and depending on how long they stake the tokens and what token it was, they got a different reputation score in this DAO. And the idea for this DAO is then to be used as kind of like a final settlement layer for disputes, and also to be used as like as a governance mechanism for upgrading decentralized exchange code. So there's like that balance that we need to strike.
So having like a governance, a DAO, to actually be able to also upgrade contracts might be a balance. That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, well, we run into the same trade-off when we were building Block Wars. Then like very few software programs are correct on the first try. So we had safeguards that were only controlled by us for the first releases, because we wanted to be able to shut it down if something happened or whatever. So that's really hard, and you have this spectrum from completely decentralized and therefore not fixable, but you can trust it, to completely one owner controls everything, and then shades in between, like this kind of DAO voting or reputation scores and stuff.
Someone also posted a thread with Maker, for example. They were talking about, even though it's a DAO, so the way it's controlled with all the contracts, they are based as well, like something similar to, you know, through their DAO and through the Maker coins and everything. But they were stating that actually, if some whales with certain amount of Maker, they would actually like sort of like, you know, talk to each other and decide to do so, they could actually empty a lot of the money from the contract, or most of the money from the contract. There is, I can't remember the specifics, it was quite long. But there is actually, even in the DAO space, like even, you know, also there are risks in terms of also who the hell you actually trust that is holding, you know, tokens of that DAO. Because at the end of the day, we've seen it with EOS as well, that like people holding tokens, and with, you know, like the more tokens you have, the more control you have. And so the more resources that you have, the more control you can have over whatever you're doing, if it's a network or if it's a contract in this case. So it's quite interesting topic. So.
Yeah. We were talking about, like 2 days ago, we were saying the smart contracts and immutability. It's like probably makes sense to be fully immutable if a smart contract lifespan is meant to be really short, like a month, 2 months, 3 months may make sense. But if it's going to be longer, then you probably want to have some safeguards to update it, because you don't know what's going to happen. The updates are going to happen on the chain, and it's so early, so many things are changing all the time. It's hard.
So a way to upgrade contracts is important.
Mike?
Yes.
Yeah, well, just asking, like, so there seems to be a clear need to be able to upgrade smart contracts.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then you're back again to the who gets to do that question, which is,
yeah.
Which is,
Where do you put your trust? In the developers, in a DAO, which is controlled by some people and maybe controlled by tokens, and then you might get this whale problem also. So yeah, it's a really tricky question.
Yeah, but I mean, in the end, you still, like, most of the people are gonna trust the developers of the application anyway to have built like a good application and a great experience. And I think kind of it's not so hard to like bridge that part of the trust into like the ability to upgrade contracts. I think what we want to aim for is like trust minimization, but not like completely removing it directly. So it's like gradually going more and more trustless, but kind of doing it in a pragmatic way.
I think this highlights one of the fantastic properties of blockchain. I think that humanity has not had a faster experimentation lab with governance models than we have had the last 10 years. No other mechanism that I know of has tested so many different ways of making group decisions in such a short time. I think that's amazing. Maybe we will see it in politics someday. That new political governance systems. Who knows?
Please.
You mentioned politics. I'm a bit of a noob here, so I'm not going to go into details. But there's something called radical exchange that I've just recently started reading about, and that what's his name, Vitalik, he has been discussing in some blog about quadratic voting and such. Yeah, well, there was there's an economist at. Sorry. Oh yeah, that's the name. I was just wondering regarding that if someone is interested in some meetup regarding that, or that could be included in Decentralized Camp, because I've been reading into it and I think it's really interesting, and it's more about governance.
Yes, that fits into our theme, definitely.
Okay.
Let's talk.
Great. That's all.
That's what it's about.
That sounds really good. It's not only about blockchain, it's about decentralization.
Yes.
And of course, politics is unescapable. So that sounds awesome. Are you interested in talking yourself?
Yeah, well, I like to talk, but
well, yeah, okay, that's the first checkbox. Okay.
That's probably fine. Like, I mean, our knowledge today on Ethereum 2.0 is very limited, right? It's and it's like, yeah.
Cool. Are you on the Slack? You're on nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's make sure we get everybody who's not on the Slack afterwards, so we can.
We'll post a link in the in the meetup group with an invite link. Okay, time to get started, right?
Yep, let's do it.
Awesome.
All right. So the first topic is Ethereum 2.0 Serenity. Let's hope that's the actual feeling we will have of it. So, like, this is a very big and complicated piece of research that's moving forward into actual production soon-ish. And I don't think anybody knows all of it, almost. I'm not sure if even Vitalik Buterin knows all of it by now.
No, it was challenging researching this too, because it's like it changes every 2 weeks. I mean, you hear new things and ever changing, and suddenly you have 1,024 shards in the beginning, and then you have 64 shards in the beginning, and it's like you have no idea what's really going on.
So there's still a few moving parts, as it seems. But like, Ethereum 2 is split into phases. So the first phase now, 0, beacon chain, that's supposedly happening January, February.
Q1, yeah. Q1 is.
That's the. How many here are familiar with Plasma or that kind of, or Lightning Network? So basic idea of the beacon chain is to be an anchor chain between different shards. So you can have higher throughput by having the shards isolated from each other, but they all connect to this beacon chain. So it's a base layer. And on this chain, you can stake in the first phase. Then on the second phase, so that's all it is. It's not really useful for much in the first phase.
Yeah.
In the second phase, you will be able to actually run these shards on top of the beacon chain and be able to cross-link between
phase
shards.
1, yeah.
Oh, sorry, in phase 1, yeah. So you can interact between different shards and transact. And then you get the throughput increase compared to Ethereum 1, where we have a global TPS of, what is it now, 15 or something?
Yeah.
And I honestly don't know what the TPS will be now. The shards were reduced a lot, but it's at least going to be much more than before. In the second phase, phase 2, then we will have finally on-chain state, so you can store state like we have on Ethereum 1 today, any variable. and we can write smart contracts. And also the EVM, the virtual machine, will be redone into the eWASM, which is much more efficient, and so to reduce gas costs. And then you're back to the state where you can have dApps again on Ethereum 2. And then phase 3 is, as far as I know, not very well defined.
Yeah, it's very, very early stage.
Yeah.
So it's hard to guess when these will come out. I think it's like we know that Beacon Chain is meant to release in Q1. After that, it's very blurry. Yeah.
But so you see how you kind of go back one step, and the thing we're trying to solve is sharding and going away from proof of work, which is very energy efficient. Then there's a whole bunch of other details, but I think if you were to name 2 reasons why, that would be it. So what is phase 0, Kalle?
You go for it. I'll take the next ones.
What?
I'll take the next slide.
Okay.
If you want to take this one, yeah.
Yeah, so the Beacon Chain is a new proof of stake chain. Anybody here who does not know what proof of stake is? Or roughly? We all know? Good. Then it will have 64 shards on top of it. They reduced the number recently. So it means less transactions per second, fewer shards, but a little bit easier to control. This will exist in parallel with the version 1 chain for a time, and that's also an interesting topic, like how the sunsetting of the 1 chain will be done. Not really clear. So what you do is that on the Ethereum 1 chain, there will be a smart contract where you can stake Ethereum 1. So you send Ether to this contract, and then this contract will push notifications that you staked your Ether, 32 Ether. And on the Beacon chain, there will be a listener for these events that pick up and register you as a staker. And then once you have been registered there, then you will become eventually a validator, which is the Ether 2 concept sort of a miner on a random beacon shard. So there's a lot of randomness here. Obviously, since it's proof of stake, you need a good random algorithm. And these shards, beacon chains, they will have committees, which is basically a group of validators that together get to either propose new blocks or attest that a block is correct. This is the new mining process. So these committees are up to 128 validators per shard. And then there's a timing mechanism that every epoch, 192 seconds, validators will be shuffled around. So these committees are very short-lived. They just last for a few minutes. This is to avoid any long-term bias, or want to randomize as much as possible. So among the committee for each block, randomly a RunDAO algorithm round this is executed among all these committee members. One of the validators becomes a proposer for that block and choose what to actually write. Yes? Yeah? As I have understood it, you actually can get shuffled between shards, but I wouldn't say I'm 100% sure.
Yeah, that's how
It was hard to figure out from the documentation, but I assume that you get reshuffled.
The thing about the idea is that you can't choose which shard you get to, so you get reshuffled randomly. So even if you have quite a few validators, there's no way you can actually kind of target one shard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's no way to control which shard you end up in the first place when you stake. That's also randomly assigned. So and then one of these committee members is the proposer. Here's the next block. These are the transactions included in the block. And then all the other up to 127 validators attest that this block is correct. And all of these have stake. So if they are well behaved, then they will earn some Ether too. If they are not well behaved, then they will be slashed and lose some Ether too. So this is the basic mechanism. So instead of spending electricity and buying expensive hardware as your stake and securing the network, the actual monetary stake is what you gain or lose of.
Yeah.
You will see a lot of my family here in the screensaver. You want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, so as we talked about, validators receive ETH in proportion of percentage of a shard stake amount. Also to know is that you can only have 32 Ether in one validator. So if you want to have more validators or more stake more ETH, you have to create more validators. But you can technically create as many as you want. And yeah, the rewards are paid every 6 minutes, essentially, so 2 epochs. But then there's a lockup time, so you can actually withdraw everything until a certain time. We think that's 180 days, but that was also conflicting. Some places said like 18 hours, some places said 180 days. So it's like...
I think 180 days sounds extreme, so I'm figuring it must be... Would you know? No. So I hope it's shorter, but at least there's a freeze period that before you actually get your payout. But we don't know how long it is. And like 18 hours or 180 days, tiny difference.
Yeah, small.
So I hope they figure that out before they launch. But
yeah, but then you also have obviously, so as you was talking about, you can also get slashed. So you can also obviously you want to be a good validator, but attest in the correct way and propose in the correct way. But if you do certain things, you can actually lose your stake, and that depends on, for example, if you're offline. So if your validator goes offline, you actually get slashed. And the amount you get slashed depends on how many other people are offline as well at the same time. So you can't, if you try to coordinate an attack, you get slashed even harder. And then it's also dependent on the effective balance you have. So if you have 32 Ether, you will get slashed a certain amount. And if you have 31 Ether, you'll get slashed a bit less, and you'll gain a bit less. And this kind of slashing and all the different validators, it's still unsure exactly how much that will affect you. But we'll see. But the main concern with the slashing is that, say if I have a private computer and that's not on, all the time, and I want to run a validator, will I get punished for, not having the same uptime as like Amazon Cloud? So, because you don't want to end up in a situation where all the validators are on different clouds around the world, because that's the only way you can actually make money, right, without getting slashed. But apparently they're trying to work through that as well, so that you don't get slashed too much if you're offline, to basically help people actually help the network become more decentralized. Yeah.
So actually, the incentive mechanism also makes sure that that network, it's kind of incentivized the network to be more decentralized, because if a lot of nodes goes offline at the same time, they will basically get slashed more. But if only one node goes down, it will get slashed less. So if there's a bunch of nodes running on Google Cloud and they all go down at the same time, they will get slashed a lot. But if your node is running on your laptop and it goes down independently from a bunch of other nodes, then you will get slashed less. So it kind of incentivizes more decentralization in that way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't looked at the specification.
No, but we don't know on a technical level. We don't know either. But apparently there's some gossip or some protocol that measures liveness among the nodes.
Yeah, I mean, you can see like which nodes actually sign the block messages, and based on that, you will know. Like, you will see if they're online or not. Because if they're offline, they won't be able to sign the messages.
Do you know where the nodes are run, on like what cloud?
No, but it doesn't matter.
No.
The only thing that matters is that if a bunch of nodes fail to sign a new block, they fail to approve a new block, then they will essentially be slashed more if there's like a larger proportion of these miners that are not online.
So you have a committee size of 128, right? And then say 1% falls off, it's just one node falls off, then the slashing will be small. But if 50 fall off, all of those 50 will be slashed much harder than the one. So the slashed amount will be bigger than 50. And that's sort of, yeah. And also, as you said, to incentivize not all of them running in one single farm that could go offline at the same time, because the risk of doing that would be much higher.
Yes, so like
exactly. So think about it. Like, imagine all of us here. We have a hell of a lot of money, and we don't give a shit. So we put all our validators in Google Cloud, and then all of a sudden, Google Cloud, like all of it goes offline. then all the validators that we have a shitload of them would actually go offline all of them at the same time, so we were heavily penalized. So we are incentivized to not put them in one single cloud provider, but maybe put them in different cloud providers and my own hosting, my own laptop and everything. So sort of a way to, and then not only that, if maybe you don't even know how many people are in Google Cloud, but like if everyone, a lot of the people are staking in Google Cloud, and then Google Cloud goes down, then everyone who might not even know that they're actually hosting in Google Cloud will get fucked anyway. So it's a way to make sure you don't host shit and in big shared resources.
So now what I mentioned to this is there will be companies offering staking services, and then that'll be Coinbase custody, for example. They'll offer that, and I think they charge already now like 25% of the actual returns of the coins they stake for you.
Yeah, they have other blockchains where you can stake already.
Yeah, like Tezos is the most common one probably. But then Binance is also in the staking game. So you can think of if you put your crypto in Binance, they'll stake it for you for free. And that's more of a customer acquisition cost they see it. So they try to get as many people into Binance by staking their coins for free. So imagine if Binance comes here, stakes everything for free for you. You don't have to worry about any hardware cost or anything. That could create some centralized areas in the markets for sure. But we'll see, I guess, how we manage that too. Maybe they split up their validators in different clouds, and I don't know.
Yeah, but it's interesting because, obviously me running with something on my laptop, run out of battery or whatever, that's not a really good place to have a validator. So where will I put it? Server in my closet or on some cloud or some those things. I think that will play out. And then will that be able to compete with clicking one button on Binance and staking? Obviously not for convenience, but so I think that will be very interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah.
And you can also get slashed in other ways, right? By proposing invalid blocks or testing invalid blocks. So if you're trying to double spend, proposing double spend, or you say double spend would be okay, and the majority detects that, then you would also be heavily slashed.
Yeah.
I just imagine like an outage from Binance services, and all of a sudden everyone who's taking there gets a humongous portion of their funds in completely
could happen.
Counterparty risk.
We'll create a shit show, that's for sure.
Yes.
So.
If you stake with a central actor, are you safeguarded against slashing?
Safeguarded, but I guess Binance, it would depend on Binance. So if
do they take the cost of?
You would need to check their terms and conditions and see. I have no clue.
But I don't read those.
No. That's counterparty
That's a trick
risk,
you
question.
can trust them, man.
Yeah, you're so trusty, nice. Yeah.
Those that use staking now, which is the output? How much do you get? What's the percentage? Because this is this is like interest, right?
Yeah, it's just like interest. We're gonna get to it for Ether 2.
Okay, but do we know those that really do it now? Is it like 1%, or is it?
It depends on the chain. So some of them, like Tezos, is like 6 to 8% per year. Some of them are like 12%. Some of them are 1%.
Okay.
But it really depends on the chain.
So if you were to consider it as a fixed return asset, that would be great. But then, of course, the underlying value could go like this. So it's not very
but that's just that's how it works now with proof of work. So it's the mean that's the interesting.
Is there anybody here who's staking something somewhere already in another chain? What have you tried?
Yeah,
Cosmos. Okay, and what is your experience? Have you done it off yours? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm staking on Cosmos and I'm doing it from my phone. So it works. Yeah, it was easy enough to try. So
cool. And you're a young person. You're
I'm not
always
staking
offline,
it from
so
my phone. I delegate it to us, but I do it through my an app on my phone. Yeah.
So it's like a one-click button stake.
Yeah.
My coins, and they do it for
and
you.
they take like 4% of the return. A Stakefish. Yeah, do you know it?
There aren't too many staking providers.
No.
And what is your experience of returns or like?
I think get like 9 or 10% per year.
That's good.
And I only tried it for a short time just to actually get in and try to do it.
Right.
So it's not too much skin in the game, but I want to try. For sure.
Yeah, no, great. So anybody's interested, speak to Martin after this show.
How long do they keep the stake? Is it like 10 seconds or a year, or what's the?
you get your share right away, but you lock it, yeah. I haven't tried to unlock my stake yet, so.
Could be a nasty surprise. 2025. Let's see.
But it seems like especially if you have a more central party doing it for you, they have such volume, so they could probably make it pretty flexible for everyone. So I would assume. So that might be a benefit too.
So yeah, everything's so convenient when centralized. Yeah.
Exactly, it's great.
That's a problem. And yeah, at the moment there's like 10 different teams building these beacon chain clients. So Prism Labs is one, which has come quite far, and we will look at later. But there are others. Yeah, this is a little bit about what happens when you want to become a validator. So first, you decide you want to be one. So you go take your Ether 1 and you deposit it to this smart contract. Then you have done that, but it's not detected yet. So then you're in a depositing state. Then after that, you have been detected and you go into a queue on the beacon chain, and for at least 4 epochs, and this is dynamic. So if there's a lot of inflow of new validators, the time will be longer. But at least 4 epochs. So 1 epoch was 9192 seconds. It's like, this is about 15 minutes-ish. Then you will get accepted if you deposited exactly 32 Ether 1. You become active, then now from there on you will be in a committee on some shard, and you will propose or attest blocks and earn stake. Then if you want to exit and withdraw, then there's again a queue to so first you register that you want to withdraw, and then that takes a while to get detected, and then you're in a withdrawing state. So that's another exit queue of about, we think it's 27 hours. Again, this is a little bit wobbly on the internet to find good information. If you were slashed at some point, so you have at some point misbehaved, the withdraw queue length increases drastically to over a month. And also in phase 1, there is no withdrawal. So it's a little bit funny. It's like this cool new Ether. It's really a new blockchain, pretty much. And we're going to toss lots of Ether 1 into it and hope enough people do that so it actually becomes active. And that requires at least...
It's like something like 500,000 Ether. Yeah. But that also changes a lot. So
yeah. And I don't actually know what will happen if we don't reach that limit.
We just call Tau.
So that's how we're going to do.
Put in 500,000 Ether.
Yeah, okay, of course.
Super silly question that but how the fuck are they gonna name the coin, the new one?
I don't know.
It's really easy, but okay, so first is Ether. What are they gonna name the new Ether? Ether 2?
Ether Neo? I don't know.
So the plan is to have this in the beginning, that'd be like a one-way bridge.
Yep.
But then as we get execution environments in phase 2, I think, you'll be able to send the ETH back to F1. So there's a promise of like a two-way bridge, but in the beginning it will only be one way. So I think the goal is for this not to be traded as a separate coin, but it's kind of unclear if that will happen or not. The kind of name that's being used right now is like BETH. Beacon ETH.
Beth. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
That contract, is that written? I mean, the deposit contract.
It's not on the mainnet. There are test
Okay.
nets. Yeah. So there is testnet versions of the contract. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
But not mainnet yet.
and there's, as it's written, there's no way to take it out. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So it's gonna die there.
Yes.
Okay.
So
How easy is it to get slashed if you're just a random person running your own validator?
You shouldn't get slashed much, is the idea, because it won't be coordinated attacks. But I mean, don't know really, to be honest.
Or there are no numbers. Say that my computer old PC is offline like 10% of the time.
that's probably not so good.
Oh, yeah.
It might be
Yeah.
fine. I don't know.
Okay, but there are no concrete numbers on that, or?
No, you can find some examples, but I don't think anybody has all of the numbers yet. We will see a little bit of the rewards, actually, going into that question. So this is an attempt to visualize how much you could have as an annual return rate as a staker. So assuming that the total issued amount of Ether is somewhere around 100 million, I think, what was it today? 108?
Yeah.
Then if this is the amount in absolute terms of the total amount that is staking, validating, then if only 1 million Ether does it, the annual issuance of returns to stakers will be this many Ether, so the return for each guy will be 18%. That's pretty good. This number is compared to the total outstanding, so this is this number divided by 108 million. Right, so this number is a little bit confusing. I didn't understand this table the first time I looked at it, but that's what that means. If we have more Ether staked and validating, the returns will diminish over time. And as you see, if this becomes super popular and all Ether in existence start staking and not doing anything else, the returns will be really low.
Okay, so does this take into account the
Sorry.
Ether mined on? Does this take into account the Ether mined on the exchange?
Good question.
I think that this is assuming a move over to ETH2, but I'm honestly not sure.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's a way for ETH2 to detect non-staked ETH1 coin in the first phase, at least. But
Yeah, but you will still have, if you assume that it's like one currency, then you will still have those, that new supply from the proof of work chain
right.
affecting the supply or the kind of how much you get.
Yeah.
Try to explain this, Carl. This is a fantastic curve.
So this, okay, yeah. I mean, historically, this is pretty correct, but future-wise, we're not sure how correct this actually is.
I think you should try to explain what it is.
Yeah, this red line essentially is the percentage of rewards you get, actually the percentage of inflation.
The issuance rates, like how many percent per year of the total supply gets added to.
Exactly. So, for example, here where we are now, it's about 4.5% Ether that's created every year.
So when we started Ether, there was almost no Ether, right? Goes steadily rising curve. This is the percentage. So the red is the right axis, and the blue is the left axis.
Yeah, and the blue is just the supply, essentially the total supply. And what's happened? This is, I guess, the percentage. There's a lot of issuance in the beginning of Ether, which is quite normal in this chain. It goes down, keeps going down to about here, and this is where we're hitting Serenity phase 0. So the point is that there will be Ether still mined, as it is now. It's 2 Ether per block, I think. And then on top of that, there will be this small increase in actual proof of stake on the beacon chain for validators. Essentially, it looks like it's meant to drop off. So the proof of work rewards are meant to drop off eventually. This to me, 2021 seems way too early. But that's according to ETHUB, this is what they put out.
But that drop, it means like they sort of turn off ETH1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that's why the year seems
it seems really
aggressive.
strange. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess the end goal is that it's only the validators getting rewards is the final aim.
And I think also this red line here is really close to 0. As the returns also seems strange. If we go back to this table, it will depend completely on how many people will actually serve as validators of the total issued amount.
Yeah.
So this is a up to here. It's real. This is speculation. It could happen differently, and it would probably not happen at this time. But to give you an idea of what it would look like, so the plan seems to be that if it becomes popular, it will be quite a stable, not so inflationary, but slightly currency. Actually, like Riksbank in 2%, close.
So if I understand this correctly, right?
Wait.
Okay, so if I understand this correctly, so Well, yeah, I was just thinking, okay, so if ETH1, for example, like continues to live at the same time as ETH2, and a lot of the people who are already mining now, like they move to staking instead, right? And then so only like major, like really major big miners, they stay in ETH1. That means that they would, if I understand correctly, they will actually gain power in ETH1 network, right? So at some point they could actually conduct like in Ethereum Classic, like these 51% sort of attacks, if people don't move their funds to ETH2.
I mean, it depends on the amount of rewards, and so if you still a lot of block rewards, it will be competitive enough that it won't matter. But then, yeah, eventually, if the block rewards go down so far that the staking becomes way more profitable, then yeah, that could become an issue on the ETH1. I mean, if there is this two-way bridge, yeah, that could create issues, I guess. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
Isn't like the last 5 people out the door will just let's go mine like crazy, but there won't be that much supply to fight over anymore.
Yeah. But the interesting there, if you go back to the other chart before, is that this is the issuance to all the stakers, right? So everyone gets, you know, a part of this pie. So it's not like you win a block or anything anymore. It's an actual like a network issuance.
Yeah. So this is the inflation rate, if you will.
Yeah.
This is the return as a staker.
Yeah.
This one over there.
Yeah, and obviously this will once, you know, while proof of work is still going on ETH1, like this will be way higher issuance because you have to add that on top of this.
Yeah, obviously it just means that the more money you stake, the more you will get. The more money you stake, the more you will get.
Here, yeah,
of course it's proportional to the amount you're staking, but it's also proportional to the amounts of stakers.
Yeah.
Had a question here. Wait, hold on.
Okay, just to add to kind of the dilemma of like moving from ETH1 and 2 and back, and like how that transition happens. Like there's an actual thing happening now, and it's the move from single collateral DAI, so DAI is the stable coin, to a multi-collateral DAI. And yeah, we can dive into the technicals of what that is, but basically this is a transition from like one token to another, and there is like a bridge, but these DAI tokens are minted by creating collateralized positions. If you move from one from the single collateral DAI to the multi-collateral DAI, you kind of basically like these DAI are starting to move, but there isn't enough single collateral DAI to close all the debt positions. So there will be some kind of some kind of race to the bottom to close off these debt positions, because there will be DAI that have been like people lost their keys or whatever. So there will be some kind of run to the bottom, and it will be interesting to observe now in the coming days or weeks how that happens, because I don't know if the single collateral DAI is going to like increase in price or decrease in price in the end when people are trying to close out these last standing CDPs. So that will be like an interesting thing to observe that might inform some of this.
Yeah, and I guess if you think about it now, Ethereum is more mined on GPUs, so you could repurpose them for something else. But if it were like Bitcoin, that you had specialized hardware, and it were all to move to another chain, it would be like the equivalent of who gets to sell off all their mining equipment before that falls to zero, right? It's kind of the same problem. So yeah, a good space to watch to have a little bit of prediction here.
I have a short question, I think, or a long one. These ether that are given to those that stake, are they like created, or is that ether that? Okay.
They were created.
Though they are created.
You mean when you stake on the one, they get created on ETH2?
No, I mean you could stake Ether2 as well, right?
You can only stake Ether2 on the new chain, yeah.
Yeah, but like so right now in phase 0, I assume you can actually only stake ETH1.
Yeah, but that's.
But in the future, you will. Yes, of course, you will be able to stake ETH2. Yeah, that's
what's
the whole
the point
point
otherwise?
Yeah.
But then there are ether created, and they need to be created all the time, right?
Yeah, but exactly, this is.
Yeah. So then there's no limit to how many ether there will be.
No, this is the inflation rate.
I mean, there's a limit, right?
So it will go up forever.
Yes.
So yeah, that's usually what you argue that it shouldn't be, right?
So it's different, right? It's more the it's a very predicted amount that increases every year, and that percentage goes down. So even though, I mean, if 100 million people, 100 million Ether are staking, right, you're getting 1.8 million Ether per year. That's always 1.8 million Ether every year, unless you stake more. So there will always be a percentage increase, but it will be very, very obvious what it is. But yeah, there is no max, no.
But of course, if you think about like the Bitcoin philosophy is that it should eventually become stable and it's a deflationary currency. In this case, that's not true. So I mean, what your actual return is that percentage minus that percentage. So in this scenario, it's not really a great financial return to get 0.1%.
So there's no discussion about transaction costs, because that could be another way to.
Network rewards, or like transaction fees, are also something that gets rewarded. I assume. I honestly don't.
I have no idea about transaction fees on.
As far as I understand, there is that concept, but if anybody knows more than I assume there will be, but I don't know actually.
The only thing I know around that was that
because there will.
proposal to take gas fees to
Mike.
sorry.
Because there will still be gas, so that gas has to go to something.
I don't know what's going to happen, but one of the proposals with gas, it was to also like people holding state in Ethereum. So there was this discussions around
this rental model or something.
Yeah, so like these discussions, because right now that's been subsidized, so by full nodes and everything actually still holding this whole state. So they were like Vitalik and then some other people were talking about this in DevCon as well. It was pretty interesting. And they're trying to also figure out ways of actually precisely how to distribute gas fees to actually people managing the state of actually the chain and be able to actually save state for the chain and help with that part. But
but like
that was one of them at least.
Introducing kind of a market mechanism inside the cost of state on the chain versus gas, right?
So they were saying like you could only like hold your smart contract state for a certain amount of time, and if you wanted to hold it for longer, you would actually need to pay for it, which this would actually get distributed to people in the chain, holding state and everything. So I don't know, there was some form of market mechanisms around there, so they're investigating that part as well.
So some of this might actually becoming from that as well, or maybe
and there's also this concept of stateless clients. Basically, if you want to make a transaction, you have to also provide the state that proves that you can make that transaction, and the miners don't really care about what the actual state is. But that's still unknown if that's going to work. I also wanted to quickly comment on the kind of the inflation. Like what inflation really is like paying for security in the network, and so that's essentially like we inflate the supply just to be able to pay for network security. And a controversial statement is that Bitcoin is most likely going to have to not stop at 21 million, because that's going to make Bitcoin not work anymore, because it's not going to be able to only pay for security through transaction fees. So most likely Bitcoin is either going to fail, or there's going to be a hard fork which removes the 21 million cap.
Yeah, or the third is that the transactions fees will become so expensive that it will become unusable for that reason.
Yeah, fail.
So because it would be, I mean, suppose that, I don't know the percentages, but suppose right now that 90% of rewards come from issuance and 10 from transaction fees. So for that to work only on transaction fees, they would need to 10x in cost. So if that pushes out what people are willing to pay for a transaction, it will die.
Or it will, I mean,
and I think that's really hard to say something about, but it will be interesting to watch.
It could also just limit essentially the use cases of Bitcoin. So maybe you'd only do bigger transactions, and you'd store longer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
$1,000 to create the channel, like it's not usable.
Yeah.
No, but even so, like for everybody on Earth to have a channel, it's 10 per second. 8 billion will take a while. But let's move on.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
This is not a mature thought, so take it for what it is. But one thing that we've been, so I'm from the Swedish Research Institute, and we like to play around with ideas where we can actually push decentralization also onto devices and so on. And we've been thinking a lot about this whole thing with transaction fees and if the network can actually support itself based on the payments that go on within it. And I'm not entirely convinced that that's a requirement. Because say that you have an ecosystem built around this where a lot of people earn money outside of the system just being able to use the system. Not all transactions or not all income needs to come from the system itself. So there can be a lot of self-interest in me just maintaining the system because I built so many services and things around it. So I don't care if I lose money on actually maintaining it.
For example, let's just suppose that you have Bitcoin or Ether or some cryptocurrency and hyperinflation happens. So even though you're paying a lot to run your node or keep your whatever and you have some inflation on chain, it will still be a lot better to do that than to have fiat money because you have hyperinflation. Would that be an example? You're making money from an external thing.
That's a different kind of thought where another system collapses. In my case, it would be, or the kind of argument that I would be making is, if I have a really good platform that is neutral and a lot of actors are using it together and so on, and there's a lot of value being generated here, it facilitates transaction, more of an Austrian economics kind of perspective on it. It doesn't matter if that system is costly for me, because the alternative is more costly.
You mean like credit cards, for example?
For instance. So the system itself does not need to maintain its own existence just by internal transactions, as long as it's a more efficient means of me to do what I want to do. So that would give me an interest to actually sustain it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, if the security of the network is not something that is, or if you can't trust that anymore, then the data itself might also be questioned. So I'm not saying, as I said, it's not a mature thought, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a requirement that the network needs to be able to self-fund. I think there are others.
So you're saying, like, for example, like a large exchange that's making a lot of profits might set up miners just to sustain the network.
Exactly.
And just pay for the cost, just to make sure that their transactions in the exchange still go on and stuff.
Take what's happening now with a lot of the ETFs and so on. They're moving into a zero-fee transaction model, and that costs them. But they make money instead of the long positions, the short positions, and all the other things that they can do. So if that system would be decentralized in that way, they would have an interest in maintaining it, even though they don't earn anything from it, because they earn money on the services they provide.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
understand what you mean. Yeah, that's actually interesting thought.
Could happen, I guess.
Creative financing is just finding income somewhere else than where everybody's looking. So yeah, that might happen.
Yeah,
but it would be, you need to find those places where they actually make money to reason and calculate about it. So for devices, what would that look like?
I don't know. As I said,
yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. We're earning dopamine. Yeah. But in interest of time, to not have you start too late, this is. Would you like to show this, Javi, or should we run it like this?
Yeah, we can just run it like this. It was actually dead simple.
Come on and get a mic first, please.
Yep.
I think we will swap spaces. So you stand over there with the yellow line.
So yeah, you can just actually go to this website. We'll share it with you guys later on if you actually want to give it a try. And it gives you like so 6 like really easy, seriously monkey following steps. So I actually managed to get my validator in like 5 minutes up and running. So it was actually really simple. And so pretty much you just need to be able to actually use, if you actually are comfortable using Docker, and if you're developers and you use Docker, it's like super, like it's just a brief, and then so you just get your Docker clients for both the beacon and the validator. You need to be able to get some some Ethereum from Gurley that how's it pronounced? I never remember.
Girly, yeah.
Girly, because
yeah.
I don't. Well, anyway, and then so actually, he also has a faucet that it will actually automatically assign you 3.5 Ether on your account as well, so you don't even have to go somewhere else to do that. So that's really, really convenient. And they have integrations with Portis and MetaMask. So if you just MetaMask, it's really, really easy. And then, yeah, and then you actually need to create a validator, the public key, and then you need to actually be able to set up the contracts, and then send it over, and then be able to start actually the validators. And then at some point you need to start the beacon chain, and then whenever there is like, I think it's a minimum of 3 peers that are actually being connected with you, then you can actually start validating transactions. And yeah, as I say, like, just give it a shot. It's that simple. And I think one of the things that we've been discussing here, so the tricky part is not setting it up. That's going to be really easy. The tricky part, if you don't want to get penalized, is to make sure that it doesn't go offline. And if you don't want to put it in cloud providers where, you know, a million other people are putting their validators and Google goes down, and then you might get slashed, you know, quite heavily. So other than that, is it's actually that simple.
I think this is also something we forgot to mention, that there are 2 different clients, right? The beacon chain client itself is supposed to be fairly lightweight, and the validator node is a bit heavier, which is the one that actually produces and attestates blocks. And you need to run both. But what is the purpose of just running a beacon chain node?
Actually, because from what I understood, I haven't had so much time to test it, but without the beacon chain, it won't work.
Oh no, but
So
like, what is the incentive of just running a beacon chain node, or is it?
To be honest, I'm
Why
not
are they separate at all? Does anybody know? Because I didn't figure that one out. What is the economic incentive of just running a beacon node without mining? Yeah, I guess.
Could be.
For decentralization purposes.
So if you're a validator on a shard, I guess you would need to have a beacon chain.
Mm.
Do you have the state to be able to validate your shard?
Yeah, no, but
Yeah.
somebody who never wants to validate, like, why would they run one? What is the incentive?
To validate the state?
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Really small. They're really, really small. So seriously, like, took 5 minutes, everything. So the whole process. No.
But this is a test net, though, so
Yeah,
it's tiny. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it was that simple. So and from what I remember, you guys, I mean, I haven't like so much into Ethereum 2.0 because also there are different types of nodes as well. So you have full nodes which hold state, the whole state of a chain, and then there is other like these sort of nodes which are stateless and just validate. So in that case, like in Ethereum 1, where you have this ginormous syncing, you know, like periods with terabytes of data syncing and stuff like that. Like from what I understood, like I don't know, you guys can maybe give more info on that. So
I don't remember. I haven't synced myself Ethereum for a long time, but I know Erik Wall had this try where he did the biggest type of sync you can do, and he did like 32 days or something. So it took forever. Yeah.
Is there a sort of a divided community? I speak loud. Within Ethereum. I mean, are there others that say this is just bullshit or ballooning? Let's try this is back Bitcoin Cash.
I think they had this big discussion around how to do proof of stake. Remember this Casper, friendly ghost, finality gadget thing. And as far as I can tell, it has come together. There's still some parallel research ongoing, but at least it seemed that they came together on what is the future direction of 2.0. So I don't think there's a breakout going to happen.
No,
was
it
that it was that sort of people arguing if like they should be more focused on what they call 1.5. So like improving what is already in Ethereum instead of actually thinking of this super futuristic, like, you know, completely shift of change of Ethereum. So
Yeah.
there is like some people arguing that that there's still a long way of things that it could be improved in the current stack, and then actually, you know, keep like, you know, arguing that we should keep improving that actually before even thinking about going to 2.0.
Yeah. I mean, I think most people realize that this is a pretty experimental kind of chain. And yeah, I mean, you wouldn't put all your money into the beacon chain right now, I think. And yeah. Yeah, but Ethereum 2.0, yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, people are pretty pragmatic. It's like, they wanted to work and succeed, but they're still working on Ethereum 1 and building their stuff on Ethereum 1 a lot. And but yeah, I don't feel like any like hardcore divide or anything. People are just like, well, if it works, great. If it doesn't work, well,
We still have Ether 1.
yeah, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's still like the Polkadot community building their own system of like interconnected blockchains. Same thing with Cosmos.
Yeah.
And there's like a bunch of other protocols like Near is building another blockchain system that's supposed to be sharded. This is using like a lot of experimentation generally.
But this is by far the
Ethereum
microphone.
Ethereum has the kind of largest. Ethereum has the largest community by far, and like the largest lead. And it's also like this experiment to build this F2.0. I think it's, as far as I know, like the most sophisticated like coordination project on Earth that I know of. That is like 9 different teams building the same implementation, and there's like research going on like how we maintain sharded data, how we do state execution, and like seeing if all of this can come together is like, I think, the most like interesting like human coordination thing to watch.
Yeah, what is it? A market cap of Ether? I don't know what it is right now, but
So like 16 million, maybe 1.6 billion. Yeah.
yeah, so like that's the size of the money at stake for this project to move forward, which is really interesting. So it's of course the developers coordinating, but it's also everybody riding on this, that it might go into the future and be successful.
Yeah, and one of the hardest problem in the Ethereum ecosystem in general is just like how to allocate capital and how to like get funding to the teams that are working on the kind of critical improvements to Ethereum 1 and to Ethereum 2. Like it's super hard to kind of do that matchmaking, and that's something that's still like a problem.
People in DevCon, they were arguing about like why in the world like Ethereum has funded 10 different or 9 different projects for clients. What is the necessity for that? Like they put a hell of a lot of money there when there is a million other things for Ethereum 1 that it could be spent on. And like we know this by heart in Superblocks, and we work with people in the community, which, you know, a lot of them have a lot of issues with many different things. So people will argue like, why are you spending so much time and money into this when you could actually allocate, you know, with 10 different clients where you could like put 2, 3, and then put a lot of those millions that you just pour there into other things to improve the current experience. So it was an interesting thought.
And I think we did this sort of during the session, but I hope that you found this interesting. This meetup is not about the experts telling it how it is. It's more about interaction and dialogue and learning together. That's the way we like to keep it. And no question is too stupid except the one you don't ask. So final chance. Anything you're thinking about? If not, then we wrap this up and we will leave the stage to you, Joel. Thank you.
All right, so 2 minutes until 3 box.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Hi everyone. I'm Joel, and today I'm gonna be talking about 3box. How many people have actually heard about 3box here? Oh, cool. So 3box is essentially like a system for building user-centric data applications. So we do like data storage and messaging for these decentralized applications that you were building. Yeah, and so I'm just gonna quickly mention like the technologies that we're using, and go on from there. So 3box is built on two main things, and that is IPFS. So IPFS is this layer for a peer-to-peer internet kind of. So IPFS is short for interplanetary file system, and basically it allows you to add files or any type of data objects into the network, and the network can kind of reference to a data object by its hash or like a content identifier. And what this allows you to do is to sync data in the network in the same way as you sync, I don't know, movies over BitTorrent. But this is like general, and you don't need like torrent files. So this is like a great base layer for just decentralized content sharing. Then we're using something called OrbitDB. OrbitDB builds on top of IPFS to create a database. So just having objects with fingerprints, as we have in IPFS, is not really good if you want to make a database. So Orbit basically takes these objects and puts them in a hash-linked list, where this list is like an append-only log that can diverge and converge again. So it's similar to a blockchain that it links back to the previous events, but it can diverge and it can merge. This technology is called CRDTs. It's short for conflict-free replicated data types. And you can build some really cool things with this type of database, and it's like completely distributed. So we could work on the same database, and we could go offline and continue working on it. And when both come online again, we can merge the updates we've done. And then the third thing is something called 3ID. And 3ID is an identity protocol that we have created that basically uses IPFS as the base layer to anchor identities. And the 3ID has different keys for doing signatures, updating the identity, and doing symmetric and asymmetric encryption. So these are kind of the base things. 3ID is also, we kind of tie that to an Ethereum address. So this kind of links to different blockchains. So 3ID can also link to a Polkadot or a Cosmos blockchain as well. So 3ID is like just an identity used to store and update data. Yeah, so I mentioned this already a little bit. There's a bunch of wallets that are integrating 3ID. So we have a MetaMask plugin for 3ID. And yeah, we're talking with a bunch of other wallets to actually integrate some our identity SDK. So to natively provide these kind of data features of 3box. But basically 3ID is what ties together kind of the data storage with the crypto wallets. So here like Ethereum wallets, but it will work with other types of blockchain wallets as well. And it allows the decentralized application to interact with the user and its data. So 3box is basically takes this concept of identity and pairs it with the distributed data, and allows you to do distributed access control to the data. So that can be like who can update this data feed and who can actually read this data feed. So we can have encryption. We can also have public data. And updating data in a 3box doesn't require you to make an on-chain transaction. The cool thing about this kind of OrbitDB technology is that you can sync the latest state of the network without having to look on a blockchain for the kind of the root hash. because you can always verify the state of the database because it requires signatures to make updates. So it speeds up development if you're building an app, because most applications are not going to use like on-chain transaction for all of the user interactions. Like the really what you want to do on-chain is mostly like financial type things, or like voting on a DAO or something like that, which doesn't really like there is so much more things you can do in an application than only these kind of more financial type applications. And yeah, you can build dApps without central servers. So there's been like a trade-off made by a bunch of applications, or like CryptoKitties is one example, where they had the CryptoKitties on-chain, but then all of the kind of user information, all of that was stored on their central server, which is obviously a problem if you care about like user privacy and things like that. So yeah, so 3bucks basically makes Web3 more human. We provide security and privacy, and we make basically decentralized applications more social. I'm gonna mention more about that in a little bit. So the first thing we kind of did was we saw everywhere everyone was showing Ethereum addresses and like, oh, this is the user, which is like weird. So we kind of, yeah, let's replace that with the name and image. And we store the name and image in this OrbitDB database. And that allows applications to just pull down the profile of the hex address of the user. But yeah, we can also do like more data-rich things, such as like comments and store settings and stuff like that. And yeah, the cool thing about also we were kind of surprised by this, but just the ability to change from like an Ethereum address to like an image and a name that's like more memorable actually helps and builds like a very thin layer of like kind of subjective reputations into decentralized applications. So for example, there's this app called Foam. They make like mapping tools where you can like vote. You can propose a location, and people that hold the Foam token can vote if this location is valid or not. And they had this problem where there was this one token holder who was like always voting no on a bunch of different locations. So he thought like, is this just like a malicious actor that's just like being angry to this network? But then when they started adding profiles, and this user actually added a profile, they saw that, oh, this address that keeps voting no, it actually votes yes on a bunch of other votes and proposals as well. So it's not a malicious user. And just that connection wasn't made before, because it's just like so hard to see these hex addresses. And that was like that aspect of reputation was like we thought that would come like way later when we have way more data associated with an identity. Yeah, so 3bucks provides privacy through encryption, and basically what we do is like every data that you add in your private storage is symmetrically encrypted with the user's key. And further, we can also create spaces, and a space is something that a user needs to explicitly consent to an application opening that space. And that means that if app1 opens space 1, then they have to ask the user to open the space. But then the user goes to another app and they want to use the same data. The user has to give explicit permission for app2 to access app1's data. So this kind of adds like segmenting of the data so that you don't expose all of your private data for all apps that you use. Yeah, so shortly mentioned greater sociability before. So the main thing we do here is something we call threads. And threads is basically, you can think of them as like a comment thread, but you can also use them to make like social walls where like you post messages on your profile, or one messages or comments. You could do things like basically comments on like DAO proposals, but you can also use them for like I think more back-end type of stuff that's not obvious to the user that they're like posting a message. And I think like this can be used in general. And when, yeah, of course, you can use the profiles to see who's posting the messages. Oh, and I also want to mention, this is not in the slide, but we also have something called ghost threads. So the threads are using OrbitDB to store data and maintain kind of a comment section or whatever. We also have something called ghost threads, which uses libpdp. So libpdp is this layer used by Ipfs and Ethereum 2.0 to sync messages across a peer-to-peer network. We use that to create like a comment or like a chat system that doesn't it isn't persisting any of the posts that the users make, and the posts are only like maintained in the memory of the users that are online. So if everyone goes offline, there will be no messages the next time someone comes online. But if there's always one person online, they can sync the old messages to the other users. So that's kind of a cool thing that doesn't require as much infrastructure. Yeah, so we have an SDK called 3box.js, and what you can do with this is basically the spaces, as I talked about, like context-specific data that's encrypted. You can also put public data in spaces as well. Profiles, just a basic schema for name, image, and some additional information. Threads, I talked about as well. Persisted threads that are like comments and stuff, and ghost threads, which you can use for like a troll box or something like that. And so those first three things are like, that's the SDK we provide. But in addition to that, we also made a bunch of React Native plugins. So we noticed that it was hard for developers building applications that are focusing on like building out their smart contract infrastructure to like integrate and like make UIs for all this stuff. So we made a bunch of React Native components for comments, profiles, and the chat box, and ability to edit profile. And yeah, this is, yeah.
A couple of questions. I'm not sure if I got this right about IPFS, but isn't it like if data is not referenced for a certain time, can it not sort of disappear from the storage?
Yeah.
And
So
how's that handled?
So IPFS is kind of similar to BitTorrent in that way. If there is no seeder for a specific data, if there is no one having that data and providing that data to the network, that data will not be there. So basically, you need someone to pin the data, and pin means that you have the data locally, and you say to the node like, "Hey, I want this data to be maintained," and that will maintain the data. So we actually run a few nodes in the 3box network that pin the data, and we're working on making it a lot easier for other people. We have like a bunch of different infrastructure companies that we're talking to that also want to run 3box nodes to also pin this data in this network.
And the second question is, what is the unit you give access to if you have private information? So is it what is the identity format of that you give access to?
So the unit is kind of a space, and a space is basically data controlled by a specific key.
What is the key? Could it be anything, or is it an Ethereum address, or is it something else?
So you usually you create a 3box profile, a session, and then a session or like a profile is associated to a specific Ethereum address. But this Ethereum address can have multiple different spaces, and the space is just like a name, is a string that differentiate this space. In the future, we want to add such that like features so you can have more explicit, like a space being more controlled by an application, and it's not like super easy for other applications to just request access to that. But yeah, that's still yeah.
But suppose like you have Joel's secret book list or whatever, and you want to give me access to it. What is my identity that you tie to that space? Like what is?
So right now we don't have a way of sharing the data in that way. The data storage is kind of only like storage that you have access to, and the applications that you use get access to when you give permission to them. We are working on implementing something right now called confidential threads. So right now all the threads are public, but confidential threads will encrypt the messages and allow you to have like multiple participants in this thread that can read all of the messages.
And then the final question, throughput, or like what is the performance of this? You're not signing anything on-chain, so I guess it's not suffering from those limitations.
Yeah.
And you don't need to sign with MetaMask, so you don't have that UX issue either. But like, how fast is this, roughly speaking?
So the main kind of speed limit is that you're running this in your web browser and it's in JavaScript. Once you have synced all of the data, so basically, if you create a profile and you add a bunch of data, and then you for some reason clear your cache in your browser, then you're not going to have your data, but it's going to be backed up on our pinning services or someone else's pinning services. And the thing that's slowest right now is just when you come online to sync that data. That's the slowest thing right now. We're working on improving the speed of that, and also improving the kind of checking that if you already have data, you don't have to wait for that process to be like long and confirm that you have the data. So that's kind of the main speed sync right now. But in terms of just like adding data locally and reading that, that's not like a noticeable thing that is a problem.
Because it's executing locally for me and then asynchronously replicating in an IPFS.
Oh yeah, so that's actually a good point. Because so this OrbitDB and Ipfs, we run a local node in a user's browser or in their application, which means that all the data is created and maintained locally. And but then there's a backup that's synced to a service provider that pins the data. So even if the service provider goes down, if you have a local copy, you still have maintain full control of your data.
So if you save some data and then you immediately close your browser, then you might have a data loss, or
no, because if you do that, you still close your browser, you still have that data in your browser itself.
Ah, that's true. Okay, so if you
yeah, of course, like there might be an issue where you you do some update and then you close your browser and then you go to another browser. But then if you come online with the first browser again, the data will be synced. So it's like eventually consistent.
Okay, so unless you use like incognito mode or something.
Oh yeah, well,
that's like
yeah,
a special case, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so I think it kind of this type of like append-only CRDT type data structure is something that's like kind of new, and we ended up using that because that was what makes sense in this kind of decentralized context, providing the kind of features we needed to provide to the app developers. But it's still kind of a new and emerging technology. But I hope that this type of like user-centric and local-first applications will get some kind of special privilege in like the browser or the operating system, where you kind of made sure that the data is maintained.
Right, but everything is stored on IPFS. There, like, you don't store anything in contracts, or
yeah, nothing in contracts.
Okay, so this is totally like blockchain agnostic.
Yeah, it's blockchain agnostic, but we tie it to an Ethereum address by having the Ethereum account sign a message that says, I approve this Ethereum address being linked to this 3ID, and the 3ID is the data identity.
So you use like something like MetaMask to sign messages, but they're never broadcasted in any way.
So you sign a message to connect the 3ID to the MetaMask.
But that's something you sign and you bring home to IPFS.
So the way it works right now is that you sign a message, and the signature of that signature and the entropy of the signature is used to generate the keys, and then you create the 3ID. But then you want to link your Ethereum address to be publicly discoverable to that data. So then you take the 3ID identifier and sign a message, and that message that signature is public. So that kind of links your address to your profile.
So you sign messages, but you never broadcast transactions.
So the transactions, you don't broadcast any Ethereum transactions. The data transactions in the OrbitDB, they're still like broadcasted in the network, but we call them data transactions because they're not like touching a blockchain. So this is like the reason this is like super scalable is because like every user kind of has their own blockchain or like their own append-only log, and there is no like one single system that maintains all of the state in the network.
Cool.
Yeah, essentially, it's like that.
Yeah, GitHub for data, you said. Git. Yeah, yeah. No, sorry, Git. So you mentioned CryptoKitties. Like, how would you build CryptoKitties on this?
So I think like the main thing CryptoKitties does is like allows you to like, I don't know, favorite a few CryptoKitties, and then you have a profile, and you can view other people's profiles and what CryptoKitties they have. So you would like create a profile that's like your CryptoKitty profile, and then you maybe add a few favorites in the public section of that profile, and then you might add some settings for your, I don't know, CryptoKitties configuration then in your private storage. And then you could just look up the public profiles of other users when you're browsing the CryptoKitties app. So the cool thing about this is you can build like really fully distributed applications without like any backend essentially.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So now, per example, like, okay, so with Superblocks we have Ethereum Studio, right? And so one of the things we've been consider maybe later in the future is to have some form of login. So at the moment, obviously, to be able to provide the usage and features and everything, we experimented before with Ipfs, and it was a pain in the ass because Ipfs generates a new hash with every single time that you change something. So if you have a project, you want to share that URL, and you want to make a update in your project for like something silly, like whatever, you need to reshare that URL, and that's big pain. And then there was this IPNS, which it was working as slow as hell, and it didn't work at all, and it took 15 minutes to just to content to appear and everything. So my question it will be, so with 3 bucks, for example, a use case for this, it could be like, imagine we perform some logging, right? So you can actually have your templates and projects on this online ID, right? So
yeah,
and then the idea with this, it will be that somehow some other provider or you could have the possibility to be able to host your own data.
Yeah, so the way I would do that is simply like you store. I would assume you would like store the entire file system of the project, and you can still do that, but then you just put the root hash in your in like a thread, so that could be a shared thread or a thread that only you have access to, and then you can keep track of like what's the latest state of the file system.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm thinking not from Superblocks or Ethereum perspective. I'm thinking about from the user perspective, what it would be the benefit of doing that.
So the benefit is like you can encrypt the data, so the data is like only accessed by you. Another benefit could be like you can easily share that across multiple devices. You can easily share it with other people, and you could potentially plug into different incentive protocols that kind of host the data.
But yeah, I mean, all those things are possible with nowadays, like sharing and all that is something that backend services. But what it will be the benefit of a user? The only, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only thing I can think of is that you can have the possibility of pinning your own data.
Yeah,
because
you can pin.
If you stop pinning it, then my data will disappear.
Yeah.
So
you can pin your own data, but you could also go from one hosting provider to another. But I think that the coolest thing is that I have this app A and I do a bunch of data. I have that B generate another bunch of data. Then there comes along someone and builds app C, and they use both data from the both applications, and then generate some new insight. And I think that kind of data composability is something really powerful and something that we really haven't had before.
Cool, thanks.
So you mentioned that you have you're like having conversations with different entities about using this. Could you share some examples of who's showing interest and what you're building together?
Yeah. Let me just go through it quickly. So this is our profile hover. You can hover over. I don't know why I say video, but you can hover over images. Get a thing. This is the comments. This is the chat box. So like you can chat, you can have that like maybe if there's like a decentralized, you would have like a troll box and troll the other traders to make profit. And we have a profile editor. So these are some of the projects that are either using right now or are gonna use in the future. So MetaMask, for example, backs up their user data in 3box. So they back up like settings and your contact list and stuff like that. Ethereum, they're down here. They also use it to back up settings. The Ethereum is another wallet. we're also talking to like, so there's a bunch of different pinning services for IPFS, but right now they're kind of dumb. You can only like tell, hey, pin this hash, and then they do that, and then you have to do that next time. But it's kind of janky because either the user have to like have an explicit kind of API key with them, which doesn't really make sense, or you kind of have to have a backend that kind of approves every new kind of thing you add to IPFS. But with using the 3-box model, they could just like, oh, this user is like can add data and just keep adding data.
Yeah, so you get that persistent handle for other applications that you didn't get with normal IPFS, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
The question will be like, for example, for these companies or like, even ourselves, like the benefit for us, it will be that like our user data are obviously not, like we could actually pin our users' data as well. So is that possible with 3box, I guess? Yeah,
and that's actually something that like some of our partners have been expressing that they want. Like we want to make sure that our data is available. We want to run a node to know that the data that our users generate are actually pinned.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I would say that pretty important because otherwise you don't control as a service your own data, which is even worse. So then your user might control the data, but you as a service don't even have like them available that data. So I would see that really important as well.
Yeah, and I think there's like a lot of insights to draw from that, like what's the relationship between the user, the service provider that provides the kind of hosting, and the developer that's building the application. And I think that relationship is like very interesting to explore.
Just when you store something with OrionDB and you store the data in IPFS, like is there some metadata structure data stored somewhere else, or?
So basically, yeah. I mean, so the only thing that you store, you have like a cache for the database that kind of stores the latest head of the database, and you also can store snapshots of the state of the database. But so the structure of an OrbitDB database is basically you create the database, there's a manifest, then you make an update, so that's like an operation, and that operation links to the previous operation, and then you keep adding operations as you like add and remove data. So this like log grows, and by reducing this log you get a state of the database. And there are like different types of databases that can reduce to different things, if that makes sense.
Okay, but everything is stored in IPFS.
Yeah, everything is stored in IPFS except like this head that's stored in just like a locally with each peer. But the head itself, like the data of the head, is of course stored in IPFS.
So it's append only. Is there any kind of compaction or cleaning up of my data if I have a lot of activity? Or I mean, I guess that's not a thing now. But suppose somebody really trolls and spams somebody's space. Is there any way to clean it up?
Yeah. So not currently, but yeah, there are of course like ways you can do like snapshotting, and you can do like different ways of like restructuring the state and kind of removing all parts of the log. I mean that's all possible, but right now it's not like something that's implemented in Orbit.
Who will pay for the storage? Will be that the user, or you as a service could actually pay that for storage?
So I think there will be like a lot of different models. I don't think there's like a one size fits all. But basically right now we subsidize the storage of the data in the 3box network. But as like other IPFS providers come online, they're likely going to have a relationship to an application or directly to the user, depending on like how that is set up.
Overall, 3box is what is it? Your like hobby project or a company or what is it? Is it inside Consensus or where?
Yeah, so maybe a little bit. Let's see if we have something more. Okay, so 3box basically. So let me just say a bit of history. So I used to be part of a company called Consensus, and I worked on a project called Uport, which is like a really early Ethereum identity project. And we built that for a while. And kind of after a while, we kind of, a few of us in the team kind of realized, hey, we're going in this like direction of making an identity system where you have credentials that is issued by companies, organizations, and governments, and that kind of becomes this civic type thing you use in different scenarios and verify your identity by getting attestations. But we saw like that's kind of not going in the direction of where the Ethereum community is going, and what kind of is needed as for the web, for like the Web3 vision that we want to build. And that's kind of when the idea of 3box started to emerge. So the idea of 3box is more like identity is not about kind of what organizations, governments, whatever say about you. That is like that's how identity, the model of identity is kind of now in the digital space. You get like a bank ID or something like that, and that's your like identity. But that's really not how identity is in real life. In real life, your identity is like made up of your interactions with the world and with other people, and that we wanted to mimic that in the digital realm. So we started 3box. We created this like kind of slim identity system on top of IPFS and tied that to Ethereum to create this kind of very dynamic data focused identity. Yeah.
But is there, I mean, you could still have issue a certificate from a university or whatever and store it in your space, I suppose.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can do that, and there are valid use cases for that. But if you think about how you interact online, like in like Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or whatever, like your identity is not made up of some like certificate that you get from somewhere. There are use cases for that, but I think most of the time you want to have a more dynamic, fluid identity. And if you think about like different use cases in decentralized like organizations like DAOs and things like that, they want to have some kind of way of discerning who would be like a valid member for this organization. And I like going the route of like, oh, this person has a certificate from A, or like that's probably not the best route. But if you can get like a reputation score based on some data, and that reputation score could be different for the organization that you're joining, that makes a whole lot more sense and could be like way more specific on like, oh, you've done like a bunch of contributions to these projects, therefore you're a good member of this organization. So yeah, I think like the future of kind of how we interact online is going to be like really rich on data.
You didn't mention a reputation system as part of this right now, but are you planning to build one into this or more have one around it by somebody else?
Yeah, so I mentioned how just adding names in an image kind of becomes a reputation system. It's kind of not an explicit reputation system, but it's kind of implicit and it's subjective. And I think the really powerful first things we're going to see is like these in these data identity systems is really just like subjective reputation, and that's going to be super powerful. But then once you start adding different types of measurements and like simple algorithms of that, it's just going to be like more increase the kind of use case of this. But I think that the subjective kind of judgment of reputation is key in many cases. Oh yeah.
3box. Why?
So I mean, we realized pretty quickly that we're like part of this Web3 movement, and Box is just like a place where you store your things.
Fair enough.
Just a question. Is there any point if you use 3box? Is there any point using ENS anymore?
So yeah, I think there is. So I think we're serving two completely different use cases. Basically, 3box provides you a way to like, just for the profile example, like a name and an image, but you can add any name you want. I could add your name to my profile. And so that doesn't provide any like Sybil resistance, whereas ENS is more like you can have more like Sybil protection in that. And I think ENS is really good for like use cases similar to email, where you want to give someone your contact or something like that. But I think 3box is better in the case where you, I know your name, but I want to, I don't know your address. I want to search and find you on some platform, and that's like when you need like more rich data type things. So yeah, that's kind of how I see the difference.
So is it it's storage for your personal data on using dApps, right? And is there also like a discovery mechanism you just mentioned where you can see you can search for other people?
So right now we don't have like an explicit discover mechanism in our profiles app. You can like put an Ethereum address and you will get like the profile if that has a profile. But right now we haven't been focusing on indexing. There are a bunch of other projects that are really great at doing indexing, like the Graph protocol and stuff like that. We might build that, but someone else in the community might build that as well.
Okay, but it's possible.
It's definitely possible to index the data, yeah.
Okay, and I'm just so back to stupid questions. I as a user, I go to some dApp, and I prove my kind of identity using signing something with MetaMask, and then the dApp can actually store data on my behalf as I interact with it. And that is then stored in my browser and synced to IPFS in the background.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, so the stored in your browser and stored in your local IPFS node in your browser. So you have actually a local IPFS node.
Right. Okay.
But that is also synced to a remote IPFS node.
Okay. Cool. Let's see. And so if you have this messaging protocol like the Trollbox, etc., so I can actually put data into someone else's space, or
so the Trollbox is only in memory. So we send messages over libpdp, and someone else gets a message, and they see like, oh, this is a message, and store it locally. But then if they like log out and log in again, it will be gone.
Okay, so it's almost like another kind of product built in.
Yeah. It's just like taking libpdp and like making it into a chat product.
Cool. Okay, and I can have many different spaces, and then I can have one or many dApps sharing one space, but they are shut off from other spaces.
Yeah, so the user have to explicitly give the dApp permission for each space that they want to access. No, so the dApp is basically just the code running in the front end.
So okay, so if I give permission to the dApp, that's a one-time thing which I need to do again the next time I come to the dApp, kind of like logging in to the dApp.
Yeah. Yeah, so you don't give like access to a third party. You only like give access to the application to, in your front end code, get access to the data.
Is it can the dApp kind of send this to the backend for?
Yeah, that's possible. And you kind of have to. Right now, you kind of have to trust the app that you're interacting with to not like do bad things.
Okay, but can that be used for creative, like for good things, or is it just off?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah, I guess it could. But that's not like something that is like a design into consideration. So kind of what we see emerging from this is like people building full-fledged applications that doesn't really have a backend. That's kind of the vision we're going for. So you would like, so we're one project that is going to be live soon. They have a prediction market, and they kind of, you can't really have a prediction market and like host that on your servers because of the legal liability. So they basically just take an ENS name and point that to an IPFS hash. And then they just like, okay, so here's the dApp, and you can make like predictions, but that's kind of boring. But then they use 3box to add like more dynamic interactions, so you can make comments on specific prediction markets, and I think they're also using the troll box for just like general trolling.
Let's see, one more question I think. So OrbitDB is kind of like Git in the sense that it's append only and it kind of mutates the final state, the current state.
Yeah.
Can you delete data? Like two things. Can you delete data like on the protocol level of that append only log? And the second one is, will it actually be deleted from IPFS? I guess.
Right.
Not.
So the first question is, The answer is maybe. It depends on how you implement the database. So if you only add the data directly in the append only log, then if you remove an entry, that might break the log. But since each entry points not only to the previous one, but to a bunch of previous ones, you might be able to be fine with that, a log being removed. But the way you would implement it is that basically, that's not really recommended to do it in that way. But the way you could do it in a better way is just in the log you store the hash of the content of the data. So you store the data in an Ipfs object, and in the log you store add this data, and then you store a pointer to the data itself. And then each log entry is just a pointer to data. And if there's a log entry that says remove, then you remove that data. Then there's a question of is that removed from Ipfs? And then the answer to that question is yeah, from your local node, but you can't be sure that someone else hasn't replicated that data and still has a copy. In the same way as you can't be sure that someone hasn't gone to your Facebook profile, clicked on your image and downloaded that and taken a photo of it.
Yeah, of course. All right. So, yeah, okay, I think I got a lot of answers there. Maybe I'll come back.
But yeah, so to add more to that question is, you can host an OrbitDB database behind an access control server. That's entirely possible. And then you can kind of put trust into that service provider that provides the service, that they won't expose the data to anyone else, which makes sure that if you delete it locally and it's deleted from the server, then you know that it's deleted. And you could also potentially think of adding policies to these databases that basically say, if you don't delete this data, there are legal precautions.
Okay. Another kind of technical question, so if you have this append only log, is there any way to how do you manage timestamps if my clock is skewed towards your clock by an hour, and then I'm offline messaging, and then I come back online and start syncing? Will it be out of order or our chat?
Yeah. So the cool thing about this type of data structure is that it's like this Merkle DAG that points to the previous object. So in that sense, it will be ordered by the actual order of events. If you go separate and do entries beside each other, then the merge will be it depends on how the merge logic is implemented. But if you just have a local timestamp, you kind of trust that the user that inputted the timestamp did so correctly. The only way to get actually solid timestamp is to timestamp the data object in a blockchain.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good use case for blockchain, timestamping.
Yeah.
Just a stupid question, also in a I don't know if there's a typical life cycle for usage of this, but at which point, except associating an Ethereum address to my profile, would I use MetaMask in conjunction with Rebox? Is that the only time I would, strictly speaking, need to, or is there any other point where I would need to sign something with MetaMask or equivalent?
So it's only when giving the application access to your $3.
Okay, so first when I associate to my profile, and then every time I give an access.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Do you have a demo?
Sure.
Yeah, we like spontaneous demos.
Yeah, we can do a demo. Let's see. Close that. Let's go to 3box.io and let's hope this works. Which account am I using? Oh, I need my password. Okay, let's use this one. And now, I don't know if let's actually let's try to sign in. So this is the 3box hub. That's the profile app. And log in. And now it's syncing my data. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, this is kind of the most painful part of this. It's actually syncing the data.
And this is proportional to the size of my data store in this case.
Yeah, essentially. Okay, so now we notice that it's synced. And this is my profile, so I have an image, a name, I have an emoji, this is my Ethereum address. Yeah, and I have a wall that I can make a comment. Yeah, I'm not gonna do that because I'm boring. Then I can click on my activity. Strange. Usually this should show up all the activity that I made on my 3box and on the Ethereum blockchain. No, this is my normal address that I've used like a lot. So let's try to resolve this.
So how would that work in the case that you have to sync a shitload of data?
What do you mean?
So, for example, like you only have your data, but your friends' data, like Facebook, for example, like see data from other people as well, which might be stored in their database.
Yeah. So the answer is that it depends. So for example, okay, now this works. So I can actually see that. Wait, someone sent. What's this? What's a kick token? Yeah, here I sent die. If I see, oh, here I sent 7 die to Lisa. She doesn't apparently have a name. So there is multiple answers to that question. Like for one thing, like the profiles, just to make that quick for applications, we have like a cache that stores the latest state, which you can ask with like a REST API to get the profile of an Ethereum address. Is there something fun? Oh, here Kenzo he sent me 15 die. And if you're building some specific type of application, you might like put these databases together in different constellations depending on like what your use case is. The complete answer of like exactly how you build applications with this type of technology kind of depends on what you're trying to build. But the notion of like a global feed is like, I mean, the answer, I don't know. It depends, like of what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that like data critical applications. So I mean, the reason why you have a backend in many cases is not because you want to own the data. It's because you remove the uncertainties that data on a front end can have, right? So like you make sure that your backend is functioning. So whenever someone performs an operation, you need to do update state. You make it in a backend, so you are 100% certain that you don't,
Well, you as a developer.
You as a user as well. So think about it. Like imagine, like I can give you an example, a really brief example. So imagine, like now with Superblocks, we are doing a certain thing where we need to broadcast transactions to the network, right? So you will need to sign a transaction, and you want to obviously end up sign it with your hardware wallet and then broadcast it to the network. So if you look at MetaMask, the issue that we have with MetaMask is the one broadcasting those transactions, but we need to have in our backend obviously information that the state of that transaction. So what happens is at the moment, we need to do all these trickery shit to be able to allow that, because the thing is the only one getting that information is the front end. So what happens is, like, in the moment that you sign a transaction and the front end is not available, then we have an inconsistent state on the back end, because like, your data in the back end, it might rely for other systems which need to also, change their state based on that data. And you cannot rely on the fact that your front end is not online to be able to change the states on other things. So in our particular case, for example, are just runners on a CI server. Yeah. So I can imagine that many other services, like the reason why you have the data on the backend sync and the purpose is to be able to make sure you have data consistency. So
there's definitely use cases for different services that do different transformation of on data. But the thing to note to realize here is that if we have like some kind of social application, I might be connected to the other user of this application, and it's actually going to be faster to sync it between the frontends than to sync it to a server and then to frontend. Another thing is, like with this CRDT or BTB type of data structures, you can also do things like build an application that works when you go on a plane and you don't have Wi-Fi, and you can still like make updates and have that still work nicely. So I think those benefits are actually going to be like huge. But yeah, there are definitely use cases for doing different forms of transformations on, especially like larger data sets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because for example, like if you have like a like a big image, for example, so or like a big file or something like that. So
Yeah.
like yeah.
I mean, sure. I mean, that's not something you necessarily want to do on a front end. You want to like delegate that to some service that gives you back the result. But the cool thing that you want to do also is like what you could do. That's kind of the vision of like what multiple projects are building to. Like you don't necessarily want to like only trusted service. You can like basically say, this is the computation I want done, and this is the data. This is the hash of the computation execution function, and this is the hash of the data. Do this computation, and then they give you back the result and a signature. So if later proves that they made the computation incorrectly, they can get penalized either in the jurisdictional system or in like some staking system or whatnot. So I think there's like a lot of things to explore there in kind of that area.
Yeah, really cool.
Is there any way to listen to updates or publish updates or react to data being changed or anything like this? Or how would that work?
Yeah, so for example, in the persistent threads that I mentioned, basically, so I guess, I don't know if that's going to work. But basically, if we both are in a thread and are making comments, like that data will be synced to our pinning node, but it will also be synced to between our nodes in our front-end codes using libpdp. And that will be like updated in your application automatically.
So I would get the promise or something to react to, or like
yeah, or like an event or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
How do you guys deal with really large set of data? So I mean, like when you have in a backend, you only provide. So when you are in a backend, obviously you might have humongous amount of data for one specific user. Imagine your entire lifetime of Facebook, you know. So that doesn't fit obviously in the browser.
Yeah.
How do you guys do that part? Like they only give you certain parts of data. Like is that even possible?
Yeah. So the way we deal with that is like essentially there's not only one append-only log. We have different databases for different things. So like a comment, a persistent comment is like one database. Each space that has specific storage is its own database. And I think that kind of limiting kind of how much data is stored in different of these databases is how you deal with growth like that. But yeah, I mean, there might be also cases where you have like some database that you have a lot of updates to. Then you might like prune that or remove a bunch of old updates and just keep the state or something like that. Yeah.
These persistent threads, they're called?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are they open for everybody, or do you invite people to them, or like how do you start one?
Yeah. So there are a few different models. Basically, all of the threads have a moderator, and the moderator can add more moderators. And then we have like open threads, which anyone can post to, or members-only threads, which you have to invite members.
So say that I'm a moderator. I guess I can ban people, kick out people, or
not currently.
Okay.
So that's like one tricky thing. That's like a research problem, kind of. It's like kind of. I don't think it's super hard to solve, but it's just like no one has solved it yet. And that's in CRDTs. This append-only data structure. It's easy to add more users, to add more write users, but it's hard to revoke access.
Okay.
Because like you can revoke access at one height, but then that user might remove those entries and just add entries at a lower height. So you need to have some kind of system verifying which entries were valid from that user when you revoke them.
Sounds like you need a consensus mechanism there.
Not necessarily. I don't think you need a consensus mechanism.
Okay, but so that was actually what I wanted to come to. That so if you had this append-only log, I say that I could kind of delete a message as an admin, but then for some reason that log entry is not synced properly. Can that happen? So So the message is then
No, I
not
mean you
deleted.
you wouldn't delete the log entry itself. You would just add a new log entry that says delete.
Exactly, but if there is an inconsistency in syncing and that entry is like temporarily not there,
Mm-hmm.
then the message I supposedly deleted is back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Mm.
Yeah, I
And
mean that's true, but yeah, and that's how like these types of systems work.
Yeah, I mean that's the compromise, I guess, for being very scalable also.
Uh-huh.
I suppose.
So, for example, what would be interesting with the issue that I told you, the data sets, like, I don't know if OrbitDB allows it, but maybe what will be interesting as a developer, it will be to control the only store in the front end, like smaller data sets of the whole thing. So you as a user, imagine you have like large data store in your spaces. So be able to, as a developer, be able to have a mixing of IPFS stored data in some node remote, and also like be able to sync portions of that data. So your front end, for example, doesn't have to hold the entire, your entire data set. So, that could be like, I don't know if it's even possible, but I could see like.
No, yeah, I mean, for example, like if you use some kind of file system storage on top of IPFS, you could like only sync parts of the kind of Merkle tree that makes up that file system, and then like sync it as needed. So yeah, that's definitely possible, but not something that 3bucks currently does.
No, yeah, I mean, that will be a thing more than, for example, maybe an OrbitDB. Like have
Yeah.
that feature that you have a specific instance of OrbitDB where, you can only sync, like, okay, I want only 10 megabytes of the data at a time, and whenever new data gets pushed into the log, and then I update my, latest state, that I only keep a maximum of 10.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, like all of the different things you can do with this technology can go in like so many different ways, and you kind of just have to focus on like building the things that provide value for the developers that they need right now.
Yeah. The question is, what's the vision with 3box? The long term, like what do you guys would like to do?
Yes, so basically what we're building is essentially this like digital representation of yourself, and like this is your digital mirror image in a sense, and what that requires is getting like the data structures right, getting how your relationship with services and applications are constructed, getting that right and getting that fair, and basically like I think this is like essential to having like an internet that we can kind of trust in a way. I think these kind of more how do you say, like basically these deterministic data structures where you can see that, okay, this is the data, this is how it was changed. I think that provides like a lot of trust in a network, and I think couple that with like blockchain technologies that provide like trust in like financial systems, there is a potential and a huge risk for that being misused to provide like incentives and structures that are very abusive. And I think kind of our vision for 3bucks is to build something that can provide kind of the social data layer for how we interact, to kind of make sure that we're keeping each other in check. So also like when you think about how powerful these attention curation algorithms get from like Twitter and Facebook and TikTok, like their algorithms for managing your attention is like super powerful. But since they own your data and they have full control over that, you have like minimal say and you have minimal insight into how that works. And I think if we're building more and more powerful technologies that basically manipulate our emotions, we need to collectively know that how that works and how that can be fair.
Yeah, this could be pretty interesting. For example, analytics. So it might sound retarded, but like having like nowadays your analytics are stored in someone else's as a business. So something that it could be extremely interesting with 3box is applying like all these data sets of analytics where you have with 15 different providers, and be able to actually control all your data and share between them with something to this. So
yeah, no, I think that's super powerful. Yeah.
Time is running.
Yeah, that's good. I think I'm done. There's a lot of good questions.
Like how reliable would you say IPFS is?
So it depends on what you're trying to do. I mean, IPFS in itself of like how data is structured and stored is like super reliable. It has like a very solid content model of how content is being addressed and like structured in the node itself. libPDP that IPFS uses is this really modular networking stack that deals with like peer-to-peer networking, and that's also quite solid right now. It's being gonna be used in Net 2.0. It's used in the Polkadot ecosystem. I don't know if Cosmos uses libPDP, but that's like turning into like a really solid networking stack where you can like plug in different transports as well. So you can have like Bluetooth transport, you can have TLS, and like you can have all these different like WebSockets and WebRTC as communication protocols, but they still like can communicate in the same network. So that part is also like quite solid, I think. The thing that I think is like not really usable is IPNS, which is like the way of like adding and updating like pointers. But I think that component is not really needed in the way it's constructed right now. And I think using libPDP to sync updates for like OrbitDB databases or like similar database systems is works really well. So I see it as like fairly solid, but there's still a lot of optimizations that we need to do.
But what about the number of like concurrently online hosts?
So that doesn't really matter. Like an IPFS node is basically, if you spin up an IPFS node, you'll have no data on that node. You'll never have any data unless you do something with it. So when you start adding data, or you start syncing data from other nodes, then you kind of get you kind of store more data. Then like maybe what you're asking is like how the kind of routing of data in the network works. So that right now IPFS is using something called a DHT, distributed hash table, using an algorithm called Kademlia for finding other peers and finding other peers that have specific content. And in theory, that scales like really well, but in practice, it's kind of unknown exactly how that scales. But the kind of approach we're thinking with Threebox is like the way you route to the peers that have the data is really something that's centered around the user and not necessarily centered like a global thing that you want to find a specific piece of data in the entire network. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Do you know how many IPFS nodes are there? I guess it's just one planet so far, but like.
Yeah, I don't know.
What is it, like thousands or millions, or like roughly order of magnitude idea?
Maybe tens of thousands.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, so we have like upwards of like 5,000 users. I mean, all of those users are not online at the same time, but each of that user is going to have an IPFS node in the browser.
Right.
But yeah, that's only active when they're actually online.
Yeah. Something for block horse, eh? Magnus?
Is the identity coupled to the protocol? So is the identity part coupled to the protocol? I'm thinking like, so you're a service that you're trying to build this, and you don't want your users to bother about having a 3-box like identity per se.
Yeah.
Are they coupled?
Yeah. Right now it's coupled. And it's essentially like it's like having this identifier is essential to like find and like associate the data to, and the 3AD also deals with like how you do access control to the data. But you can hide that to the users. It's not like, oh, you need to use the 3-box profile. That's not it.
Okay, so you could actually have. I mean, yeah. So that's what I meant. So from a user perspective, you don't need that. So you could actually hide that behind it, and then So
Yeah.
So like a user just signs something in your system, and then you type that
Yeah.
up,
So
signature.
something we're working on also, and a few wallets have integrated right now is something called an identity wallet this identity wallet allows you to support 3 bucks directly without needing to have like a MetaMask thing that's connected. And we also actually have like a MetaMask plugin that provides natively like the 3ID functionality. And that essentially allows you to like do all of that in the background, and you don't ever need to sign a message with MetaMask to like with the Ethereum key if you don't want to.
So does it have to be Ethereum key as well?
No. So that you can associate like any type of blockchain address to a 3ID.
Are there any like centralized parts of this, backends, anything?
Yeah. So right now we have the pinning node that pins the data. That's fairly like that already works in a fairly distributed way. Like you can have multiple nodes pinning the same data. So if our node goes offline, both the user will have their data locally, but if another node also runs, they would also have a backup. The thing that's centralized right now is something called the address server, and that's used for storing and retrieving the links from an Ethereum address to a 3ID. But we are working on a protocol that will make that into like a gossip protocol, where you can like ask the gossip network like, what's the latest 380 that this address points to? And so that's kind of spec'd out, but it's not implemented yet.
Okay, cool. So you're more or less removing the centralized parts.
Yeah,
as you
because
go.
like we don't want to have that. That's
Yeah,
a
of
liability
course.
on our part. We just want to remove it as quickly as we can.
Okay, and there's nothing really stopping you except time.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason we built it this way, but was we didn't have the insight of how to fix it in the beginning, but we also just wanted to make something usable that actually could help developers, and we saw that as a trade-off worth making to then be able to move forward.
Right, of course. And it's open source, everything, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can find it on our GitHub. So github.com/3bucks. We have Twitter, Medium. This is a Discord community, and this is our documentation. If you want to like look at how to build with 3 bucks.
What license do you have on the code?
We mostly used MIT. That's what we use right now. That we might like be interested in looking at other things for, but yeah, right now we don't have a reason to change.
And it's production ready, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Any?
And 1 or 2 questions.
I think a really good thing that you have been thinking about user experience, and that's sorely needed, and really appreciate that, seeing that.
Yeah.
All right, we should be rounding off here. Any last questions? So you will thank you very much for coming all the way from Berlin and Gothenburg. Cool, and it's dark outside. It has been all day, I think. So anybody up for some drinks afterwards, or we'll see. One for the road, I think so. All right, so thanks a lot, and thank you to the